Not only am I going to continue listening to every song she releases, but now I'm also going to listen to every book she recommends. Because I love these and I had to make a video talking about why. So Dua Lipa has been one of my favorite artists for a while now, and I follow her Instagram, her social media, and she posts a lot about books. As you might know, she also has this podcast / book club. I've been wanting to get into her recommendations for a while now, and I decided now is finally the time. This year was finally going to be the year that I join a celebrity book club. The official Service 95 website says, each month we will discuss a book personally chosen by Dua, representing writing from across the globe, assisted by new editorial content, such as discussion guides. Say less, alright? Your girl loves a good discussion guide. Sorry, I can't come out this weekend. Why? New discussion guide just dropped. And further reading lists that will bring you closer to the writer, their inspirations, and the worlds they create. I love this. This whole thing really drew me in. There's nothing more vital to the human experience than reading from a wide range of sources and wide range of experiences, topics and themes. Highlighting that global lens is something that I think she does really well. And I am all ears when it comes to hearing about people talking about their craft, especially people at the top of their game. I've listened to a few podcast episodes where she talks to actors and comedians and she shares her own experiences. I just love that. They're really insightful and great, and I highly recommend them. Let's get into the books. So I started reading along after she announced the January pick, which was The Guest by Emma Cline. I think it was announced during November, December. I read that first and then I worked backward. I went into this book without knowing anything, without even reading the blurb. It makes the experience of reading so much better when you don't know anything about it. You just go from the first chapter and build your idea of the world from there and discover the book without any preconceived notions, any preconceived ideas. And I was not expecting this book to be what it was at all. Especially the ending, which I am not going to talk about in depth just because I want to avoid spoilers. You should definitely read it just for that, just for the experience of that final chapter, that final sentence, that final word. Start with the title. So it's called The Guest. That comes into play in more ways than one, especially our main character. We have Alex, who's a guest in this world that she entered, and somewhat unreliable narrator. The book starts off with her on a beach. She's gotten herself into some trouble at the beach. She's trying to stay calm, struggling to swim back to shore. She's thinking about belonging. The way it opens up, the prose, the insight into this character was very well done. You can't help but also feel very drawn in. She's gotten herself into some trouble in the city and she's now in Long Island living with her new sort of relationship. Because of a few missteps, she gets dismissed. The guest in this world that she is no longer welcome in. From there, we follow her desperate journey to try and stay on Long Island until she's forgiven because she can't go back to the city. This book really delves into these modern ideals that we have in such an engaging way. There's definitely a psychological aspect to it, just the way these characters are analyzed, a world of very inaccessible, exuberant wealth. Summarized so well in the passage about the high fences. It's so closed off. No one can have access to, no one can see what's inside. The way this character narrates and sees the world, there's so much meaning in everything that she says. Very insightful. She's smart and she knows how to manipulate people. She knows what makes them tick, knows how to exploit these preconceived notions. The subtext that's never really spoken about, but of course it drives a lot of actions. I don't think I've ever read a character like hers before. Even though she doesn't always make the right choices, she knows what those choices are, which is another aspect that makes reading this book kind of frustrating. In that vein, we're also kept out. There are only a couple of glimpses of Alex's life before her time in the Hamptons, and they aren't really elaborated on. Even during those few days, there are a lot of moments missing. It really works well to build that sense of mystery, and every time you get these little passages, you can't help but be more intrigued into what kind of person Alex is. The reader is really given that task, that responsibility of characterizing her, because a lot of her backstory is missing. Whether you root for her or whether you don't root for her, throughout the book she seeks self-preservation, yet she cannot help but be the cause of it crumbling down in such avoidable acts of destruction. Like this character, she truly kept me on edge the entire book. That is a testament of a really great storytelling and character building. She also has such sharp, biting commentary. I love when characters see underneath the surface, and it's interesting to see them exploit that for their own benefit. She really does not hold back as a narrator. The author refers to this particular style of writing, this particular genre, as having a delusional narrator. That is such a brilliant way to summarize it. Moves at such a perfect pace. It lulls the reader into the sense of security similar to what the character is feeling, and just pulls the rug out from under us so swiftly, so extravagantly, so devastatingly quick. The story seems so simple on the surface, but of course there is so much going on. I never thought about how a party, a gathering, could be this huge monumental event like it is in this book. Extremely high stakes. I'm going to talk about the final chapter now, so skip to there if you don't want to see any spoilers. Because so much was intentionally left out, that ending worked for the book so perfectly. It is very rare that a book has me up until midnight rereading the final chapter, googling what other people thought the final chapter was, seeing these alternate endings. Thing is, with how the final chapter was written, no matter what you think the ending is, you can find clues throughout the text, especially in the final chapter, to back you up. Definitely a brilliant book that engages the reader up until the final moment. You can see why it's gathered so much acclaim in the past few months, and I'm glad I got to it. So shout out to Dua Lipa. Want to do more with her than just the feature. And by more, I mean join her book club. Because I loved that book so much, I decided to go to the previous month's book pick, which was The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. I've had this book for years now, and I'm so glad I finally got to it. Did I put it over here? This book follows two identical twins. They decide to leave their small town at 16, and that is where their story and their lives diverge. With one twin deciding to live her life as a white woman and the other as a black woman. Desiree eventually ends up going back to the community she grew up in, that she was really vocal about wanting to get away from, while Stella, leaving her roots, decides to live as a white woman instead. She's living in a state of paranoia, and she continues that way for decades. She's always forced to be on guard and living in fear of those closest to her ever finding out. Following decades of their lives and their daughters' lives, 3 generations of these women. Because it's set in the not so distant past, you see how the world changes through their eyes. The central themes are identity, race, and trauma. There's of course this lifelong struggle with racial identity. There are a lot of aspects that you don't really consider if they aren't your own lived-in experience. A lot of really powerful quotes in this book as well. I think on the cover it says, "You can escape a town, you cannot escape blood. Sometimes who you were came down to the small things." Another quote that I highlighted and wrote down was, "There were many ways to be alienated from someone, few to actually belong." At the heart of the book, it is about belonging, not only to others, to society, but also belonging to oneself. I remember getting to chapter 5 and thinking, already there are so many well-written characters in a story that's not only well-written, but so well interwoven through one another. Moments when you're weaving through time, you go forward, you go backward, and things are revealed at the perfect moment. The way the storylines intersect and unfold is a roller coaster. You're never lost or wondering what's going on for a minute. Kind of like you're going through their life with the focuses on these moments that have such a big impact on things later on. It's a full story weaving. They felt like you knew these characters because you get a glimpse of these moments where these characters make choices that define the rest of their lives. It takes us on the journey with them via their backstories. It explains how the characters got there. Every character story just had so much depth. A lot of authors just lay out the plot without providing the proper context. This book didn't suffer from that at all. It really focused on the character growth, these insights into human nature. They get older, they discover themselves, or they start creating this idea of themselves that they've strived to be, that they've chosen to be. And it really asks, who are we? When so much of ourselves is defined by others, already been decided before we're even born. Focus on the ever-present struggle of finding yourself through the confines of society and their expectations. It doesn't shy away from the really hard topics, these really hard moments. Such strong characterizations, which isn't easy to do in a book, not only spans decades but has multiple characters. Because of that focus on the different generations, it's not only about those themes, there are also a lot of themes about family dynamics present. The imagery throughout gave me goosebumps. I feel so many emotions reading this book and focusing on the multiple characters. Dives into their struggles, their choices, their motivations in such a heartfelt and understanding way. Both these books were brilliantly written. I genuinely loved reading both of them. They had such a focus on how these characters are perceived by the world that they live in. When the perception of a character relies so heavily on the exterior, I think it only works to make the interior that much more intriguing, especially to us as readers. Both the authors handled their subject matter so well. Both these authors created brilliant, engaging characters and worlds. These books were 5-star reads. Highly recommend them both. The insights that are offered of this modern era cannot be overlooked. These are the notes that I wrote down before I listened to the podcast. Afterwards, I listened to these authors talk about their stories. I love the questions that were asked. Her read of things is really insightful. There's just so much extra information provided. Notice there's reading lists, there's historical context for settings and soundtracks, which I love. Of course, music and writing goes hand in hand, especially in character creation, these emotions imbued in the text. Another thing that I love about the podcast is listening to authors talk about their craft. So much of writing is focused on the end product. It applies to other art forms too. It's always the end product, the end creation. But there's so much value in focusing on the journey as well and opening that up to fans of the book. There's definitely not enough attention put on the process, and interviews with authors and how this was made videos is the closest we'll get to being in a single moment of the journey of creation. I was a huge fan before and I'm an even huger fan now, as well as a big fan of both these brilliant authors. The month before The Vanishing Half was 100 Years of Solitude. I think I have that book over here and I haven't gotten to reading it. Definitely want to read more of her recommendations. I might join more celebrity book clubs. I know a lot of celebrities have formed their own book clubs. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're going to read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd love to hear it all down in the comments. If you like this video and watched this far, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you on the flip page. So catch me before I go, Houdini.